designated with the press and friends present, first let me say how gratified I am to be here, particularly to be at the center. In my career, I have been at some point associated with the center. I even had the audacity sometime to do some lectures at the center. I hope you will Makwai Ofinga is nothing against Nigeria and I'm gratified. I'm also grateful to this organization for organizing this press conference. I must be very frank and say I was first reluctant. I was reluctant to have this press conference because I had not yet assumed fully my responsibilities. I do so on Tuesday at 5 o'clock when I would have a proper brief from my colleagues in the secretariat and have all the files at my disposal. So I was not going to do so because I was afraid that you may be asking some questions which I'm not familiar with or I haven't been following. And so I had to give a fair warning in the process of your questioning. If I find that some of the questions are not compatible with my brief, I shall have to refrain from answering it until I get properly briefed by my colleagues in Addis Ababa. With respect to your question, I should like to say this, that quite clearly anyone surveying the situation in our continent and the developments that have gone through in the last decade, one has to take note of the fact there have been significant developments in the process of decolonization. And there is no doubt that the political map of Africa today is substantially different from what it was. The perception of some of our friends in the outside world about Africa, insofar as the process of decolonization is concerned, also has undergone a qualitative change. I remember a time when people considered it as a matter of authority to speak about the invincibility of the white redoubts in Southern Africa. The things will remain the same. The post-colonialism will remain. And there were even those who might not have necessarily shared Mr. Smith's optimism of no independence within 1,000 years, but somehow might have believed Mr. Smith that there was no prospect, no immediate prospect for Zimbabwe independence in the horizon. But all this now are a bit of history. The Portuguese Empire collapsed thanks to the efforts of liberation movements. Rhodesia is no more, and in its place Zimbabwe has come up thanks to the effort of the Patriotic Front, struggle of the people of Zimbabwe, supported by Africa and the international community. And so strictly speaking now, insofar as classical decolonization in Africa is concerned, we are really on the verge of the final termination of colonialism in the continent. So to that extent, I must say the picture is definitely a better picture in our continent than it was. But there is no doubt also that the situation that is facing the continent right now is the most complicated and the most complex and the most difficult. There are prospects for change, but there are difficulties. There is reason for optimism, and there is absolutely need for vigilance, even in the midst of optimism. The case of Namibia is a situation point. I believe we all are of the opinion that notwithstanding the problems here and there, we have reason to believe that Namibia will be independent as predicated by the United Nations plan that is on 1st of April 1990. But there are a number of issues which have to be overcome. We have to ensure that the United Nations plan is implemented effectively, that a sense of fairness and fair play takes place in the election process, that Namibian people are not denying their right and their choice because of this or that machination by the racist authorities, and that there is no intimidation or harassment of the people of Namibia, so that the people of Namibia themselves can decide their own destiny. I believe the international community, by and large, believes and does so with logical reasoning, that if the Namibian elections are to be held in fair conditions, then we are going to see an elected government in Namibia led by SWAPO, and ultimately an independent Namibia under the leadership of SWAPO. So, as far as Namibia is concerned, there are reasons for optimism, and I think it's important, in my opinion, for the United Nations to keep on the pressure, to see to it that there is no messing up of the song plan, to see to it that the atmosphere of stability and security is assured in the territory, particularly now that the entire leadership of SWAPO, which has been forced to be in exile, struggling for the independence, is now back home. To see to it, therefore, the people of Namibia do exercise the right as provided for in the United Nations plan. So I'm saying that Namibia, as far as I'm concerned, does give room, does give hope for optimism. As far as South Africa's situation is concerned, I believe that the onus is on the regime in South Africa. We cannot, not just Africa, but the international community, cannot conceivably visualize a situation whereby we enter the 21st century still with the scandal of apartheid in existence. We cannot think, we cannot possibly imagine that by the year 2000 we'll still be living in a world where a person can be judged by the pigmentation of his skin rather than by his contribution to society. And so the apartheid system is an abomination and an aberration of everything that the international community stands for. And this is not just a struggle for the African people, it's a struggle for the people of the world. And on that there can be no compromise. If you compromise with apartheid, we are compromising with the very sacred principles for which all our countries, irrespective of our religion, of our colors, of our religious beliefs, and of our political and ideological beliefs, apartheid must go. And all of us must be committed to ensure its elimination. Now, whether apartheid will go by less violent means or by violent means, frankly, will depend primarily on two factors. One, the attitude of the apartheid regime in South Africa, and secondly, the attitude of the international community. The attitude of the international community, it seems to me, now more than ever, is the time to put the maximum pressure on the apartheid regime. Economic pressure, political pressure, diplomatic pressure. We must not let go of this pressure. This is the most important and effective weapon to bring about change in South Africa. Parallel to that change, parallel to that pressure, is a pressure exercised by the people of South Africa and the liberation movement. The pressure of the intensification of armed resistance, the pressure of the mass democratic movement within South Africa itself, which is clearly been evidenced by the active role of the trade unions, the active role of the church, the active role of youth organization, and significantly within the mass movement, we are seeing a phenomenon which I think gives comfort and satisfaction to all those of us in Africa, in free Africa, in the world, who have always taken the struggle in South Africa as a struggle for human liberty and not a struggle against whites. Struggle to bring about change where a person will be judged by his contribution, not by his color. I'm referring to the events of recent past where there was a massive demonstration of blacks and whites and colored people joined together in opposition to the apartheid regime. And Africa, in this context, has reaffirmed its position, which has been earlier elaborated in Lusaka, in 1969. Those of you who are familiar with the Lusaka Manifesto would recall that it has always been Africa's position to prefer a negotiated resolution where negotiations are possible. No one wants to fight for the sake of fighting. No one wants to die for the sake of dying. No one wants to engage in armed struggle if other options are there. But whether an armed struggle must continue and must be intensified really depends not on the liberation movement in South Africa. It depends primarily on the apartheid regime, now under the leadership of Mr. de Klerk. So Africa has made its position, and we have said very clearly that there are possibilities for negotiations for as long as certain conditions and certain principles are observed. For example, you cannot negotiate whether or not all people are equal. That is a non-negotiable principle. You cannot negotiate, therefore, whether apartheid must go or must be modified. Apartheid is beyond redemption and is beyond modification. It is a system which must be eliminated. So once the principle that apartheid must go is accepted, once the principle that all people in South Africa have equal rights in their country is accepted, once the principle that the objective is to create a non-racial, united, democratic South Africa is accepted, then it is possible for negotiations between the representatives of the oppressed people in South Africa and the representative of the apartheid regime. And that is the type of negotiation which Free Africa has back in the past, is back in the now, will be back in the future, as manifested in the Declaration on South Africa adopted by the Electoral Committee of the Heads of States and Government of the OEU in their meeting in Harare. So to sum up, I believe that we have every reason to be optimistic about the future. There is no way that the South African regime can reverse the trend of change. Change will come and is coming in South Africa. But whether this change, these last days of the apartheid regime or these last years of the apartheid regime will witness more violence or less violence will depend entirely on the performance, behavior, and character of the apartheid regime. One example is how, for example, they pursue the process of independence in Namibia. Another example, how they act in respecting the territorial integrity, independence, and sovereignty of the African states bordering South Africa. How they stop or increase the destabilization of Mozambique. How they stop or increase the harassment of countries like Botswana. Now, therefore, what I'm saying, the ball is in the court of the apartheid regime, and Free Africa is keenly observing and watching, at the same time invigorating its vigilance.
I think my colleagues agree with me that response has been both powerful and instructive. Now, as a follow-up to this question, Secretary General, the liberation struggle, as you know, can be separated from the Palestinian people's struggle in the Middle East, for which both of them are interlinked. The successful Israeli wars of aggression against the Arab people have ended up with more Arab land being annexed to the outrage of the OAU, which after the 1973 war resolved to recall on its member states to civil relations with Israel. Recently, however, a diplomatic offensive has been launched by Israel to try to restore diplomatic relations with African states. Secretary General also commented on this.
First, let me say that the interrelationship between the struggle of our brothers in South Africa and the struggle of the brothers of Palestine is self-evident. It stems from the recognition that both are fighting for self-determination and both are fighting to be recognized as a people and not to be treated as something subhuman. It also stems from the fact of a conspicuous manifestation both in word and in deed of solidarity between the authorities in Israel and the authorities in South Africa. There is abundant evidence of collaboration in the military, economic, technological, and other fields between the South African government and the government of Israel. So the need for solidarity, therefore, the need for supporting each other's struggle is clear. And that is why the African countries and African states, the Organization of African Unity, have consistently supported the Palestinian struggle, not simply as a gesture of support or a gesture of solidarity, but also out of recognition that this support is also of self-interest. By supporting the Palestinian struggle, we are in fact also supporting the struggle of our people in South Africa, and that really you cannot compartmentalize freedom. When freedom is threatened anywhere, freedom is threatened elsewhere. And I'm paraphrasing here, not my own statement or the statement of an African leader, but this is a statement which has been made by Western leaders. And so Africa has supported the Palestinian struggle. Africa has supported the Arab countries after the Israeli aggression of 1967. And Africa did break relations with the State of Israel as a manifestation of this support. And the position of the OAU has not changed. So far, the position of supporting the Arab struggle, the Palestinian struggle has not changed. But with respect to the breaking of relations or restoring of relations, in the final analysis, the decision to establish, restore, or break relations with countries is a decision which is made by sovereign states and sovereign governments. And clearly, only a sovereign state can take that decision. And I'm not in a position here to make a judgment on the merits or demerits of each individual African state. So I think all that I can say is that as far as Africa is concerned, it has supported the Palestinian struggle, it will continue to support the Palestinian struggle. As far as I'm concerned, I will continue to abide by the decision of the OAU, because in the final analysis, the Secretary General's responsibility is simply to implement the decisions of the organization. But as to the individual actions of individual states, I have to respect and say that very certainly that is something which each and every individual African state has decided, will decide, is deciding, and it's nothing that I would like to remember.
Well, the time is now yours, comrades of the local and international press corps. I now call upon anyone with questions to fire, please. But first of all, identify yourself and the institution you represent.
My name is Salim from Tanzania School of Journalism. Your election to the post of Secretary General has disclaimed to those who have been trying to divide Africa into spheres of influence vis-a-vis Francophone and Anglophone. Yet, we cannot simply wish away phenomena or pretend that Africa does not suffer from this logical colonial hang-up of Anglophone, Francophone, etc. What are your plans to redress this anomaly so that Africa can become Africaphone, nothing more, nothing less?
And the responsibility of the African leadership to rectify these anomalies. And I could not have been elected Secretary of the OAU if I only enjoyed the support of any one single group. There is no question either the Francophone, or the Anglophone, or the Russophone, or the Arabophone, or the Swahiliphone, and no other phone can elect a Secretary General. No way. No group of countries can elect a Secretary General. Only the collective wisdom of the heads of states can do so. And the mere fact that I was elected with such an overwhelming support shows that my support came from as much from Francophone, from Anglophone, from Russophone, from Arabophone, from Swahiliphone. And so I think that itself is an important development. I think that we have inherited many things in our continent, and it is not something which can simply wish away. It's a question of relationship we have inherited, institution which we have, the relationship we still have, just in Africa, for example, which is effect. The Francophone countries have close relations with France and very small countries. Anglophone countries have close relations with Britain and English-speaking countries. And so I would say the problem is not so much whether you are an Anglophone or a Francophone or a Lusophone. The problem, and I think this is the major challenge of African leaders, is to see that despite all these Francophone identities, which has more to do with language than to do with the reality of Africa, that they do not allow the factor of language, the factor of regional group, to come in the way of our collective solidarity. That Africa has this huge share of problems, and that we can only confront these problems by working together as Africans, irrespective of our historical relationship, irrespective of the language we speak, irrespective of the region we come from. And for me, it is a particular challenge that I have been elected at this particular time, because one of my clear responsibilities and my clear challenge ahead is to show by my actions that anyone who believes that I'm an Anglophone candidate was wasting his time. I was a candidate for Africa, elected by the African leaders, and I will serve faithfully and as effectively as possible all African countries, without exception, irrespective of what language they speak and irrespective of where they come from. So I would say really the challenge is on, I will not be too preoccupied with what language we speak or what groups we learn. I think what is important is to assert ourselves as Africans and fight as Africans and argue our case as Africans, which in fact I would say in many cases where we live. I spent a considerable time in my life, or my diplomatic life, in the United Nations. I was there for 11 years. And I want to assure you, in 11 years that we worked there, from our own experience, we operated in the African group as an African group. It was not a Francophone African group or Lusophone or Anglophone. We worked as an African group, and we were effective as an African group because we were speaking one voice. It should be my particular responsibility and my particular aim and ambition to work seriously so that I can continue to command the support, understanding, and sympathy of all the African states and all the African people, and obviously the confidence of the African leaders in the world.
Salim, my question is concerned, what will be, from your point of view, the ways of solution of that problem in Africa? Will it be possible to solve it up to the end of the 20th century? Thank you very much.
On how to solve that problem, I'm sure a solution will be thought of long time ago by African leaders. And what I can say, the great question in Africa is one of the most burning issues of our continent. Sometimes comparisons have been made between the debt burden of Africa and the debt burden of North America. And let me say this, in terms of quantity or in terms of amount, definitely the Latin American debt burden is by far bigger than the African debt burden. In Africa, we're talking in terms of something to the tune of $230 billion. In Latin America, we're talking in terms of a figure up of $400 billion. But in terms of impact, the African debt burden is absolutely unbearable. And for the African countries who have to service this debt, to say nothing of paying the principal, it is a matter of choosing between the paying and in the process allow thousands sometimes of people dying of starvation, or refusing to pay and incur the wrath of the international community and in particular the donor countries. So you are caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. And quite frankly, there is very little that Africa can do in that context. Except that as has been pointed out, that this is an issue which is preoccupying the African leaders. As you know, in 1987, the African heads of states had called for an international conference between the debtor nations and the creditor nations, with a view to discussing on how we can overcome this serious economic and human problem. I say human problem advisedly so far as the conditions of the African people is concerned. Unfortunately, until now, the response to this proposal has not been as positive as we would like it to be. There have been a number of actions taken individually by many states. For example, only recently the French government announced the Salim debt cancellation, and this is a welcome development. Some other countries, and there is a mixture of measures which have been taken by a number of countries. But in finances, these are very, very minor developments compared with the tremendous problem that we have. So the only thing I can say is that as Secretary of the OU, I will vigorously pursue the decisions taken by the heads of states to work for a convening of this conference, but also to try and see through the principles of negotiations and understanding with the various greater countries what can be done. And I think what is important is the world must know we live in the same world, and that stability is all inclusive. You cannot have a stable Europe, a stable America, and a very unstable Africa, or a very unstable Latin America. Because in the final analysis, that instability will have its own repercussions in one form or another in the countries of the North. So it is also in the interest of the countries of the North to see to it what concrete actions can be taken to ameliorate the situation which is facing the African continent. And it seems to me that this is a matter which also requires some understanding and some educational process also for the countries of the North, and particularly those who have not yet shown the inclination to understand the magnitude of our problem, to be able to do so. But it is something which we cannot do individually. One thing Africa cannot afford to do, African countries, quite frankly, cannot individually hope to solve the problem of debt. We must act together, we must act collectively, and we must act in concert. Individually, we will all face the music. Collectively, we will still face the music, but in a lesser situation and with possibilities of some success.
Can you identify yourself?
My name is Saif Ali Wakilagembe, Assistant Secretary, Department of Ideology, Political Education and Training, Umoja wa Vijana Tanzania. Your Excellency, the way the terminology stability is always inclusive and will highly impress me, which gives me a chance to play the question on regional integration. Your Excellency, the EEC countries which signed the 1986 Single European Act intend to have a community-wide free movement of goods, capital and labor from 1992. Under the series of Rome Convention, what might be the task ahead as far as OAU is concerned on multilateral bargaining after the implementation of the European Commission's white paper on the single market after making 12 separate markets into one?
We need to know exactly what has been done at the continental level, what has been done at the OAU level in collaboration with the ECA, concerning Africa's negotiating postures and African negotiation position. And so I would not like simply to give you a general answer. But one thing I can say in response to the question, that the unity that is envisaged for Europe is going to be something good for the Europeans. But that does not necessarily follow that it will also be something good for the Africans. And consequently, it is extremely important for the African countries to get our own acts together. We have to sit down and see how we are going to face a new Europe, a new Western Europe, a united Western Europe. Even now we have a lot of problems in terms of getting our commodities to some of these countries. By the time of a united Europe, you will have a much tougher competition for many of the commodities that come from our respective countries. Even now we have some problems in getting proper responses to some of our needs as far as developing countries. By that time, if we are properly organized, I think we'll be in a better position to have also an input and an inroad into this important important entity that is going to emerge, which is going to be a force to reckon with, not only in Africa, but it's going to be a force to reckon with in the whole context of international relations system. So all I can say that if the Europeans, if the Western Europeans, important and developed as they are, by far developed in a combination of African countries, if they feel the need for unity, if they feel the need for having a common market and even thinking in terms of common monetary system, it's all the more important and all the more urgent and imperative for the African countries to also think in terms of ways and means to translate the rhetoric of African cooperation and African unity into something more meaningful, into something more real. We've got to move from the period of declarations and resolutions of intentions to a situation of concretion. The path of economic cooperation and economic integration is the only path for Africa. But it's a path which must be taken. Even if it is done so gradually, but we must start from somewhere. Otherwise, we will be facing a continent and be facing a world which is extremely difficult for the African countries to play their due part in.
I'd like to ask a question about the refugee situation in Africa. Apart from the debt problem, the refugee situation is causing a lot of problems to a number of countries in Africa. But lately we have seen initiatives being taken, particularly in the Horn of Africa, between Libya and Chad and in other parts of Africa. Initiatives have been taken. Is this going to be one of your agenda, to solve the African problem of refugees?
The honor of electing me as the Secretary of the organization. Among the issues of top priority for Africa, certainly the issue of refugees must feature. We are talking in terms of something to the tune of 4 million or so people, between 4 to 5 million. And this is a significant amount of people. Now, there are a number of things to be done. One, of course, genuine attempts at solving conflict situations is a right step in the right direction. Both conflict among African countries, but conflicts within African countries. The creation of a climate of confidence in all our countries so that people will not have to work to their future. And it is my belief that this is being done now on the continent. It is my belief that many of our countries in the continent, particularly those in problem areas, there are clear signs on the part of the leadership and those who are opposed to that leadership, clear signs of trying to find out settlements of outstanding problems. The situation, for example, the discussions currently going on in the Ethiopian government, in the Regional Liberation Front, People's Liberation Front, the efforts being made to, as far as the situation in Chad and Libya is concerned. But you have all problems and there are new problems, right? We have the unfortunate problems between Senegal and Mauritania. But again, considerable efforts are being made on that. As you know, the chairman of the OAU, President Mubarak, was recently in action. He was also in Dakar in attempts to overcome that problem. So one contribution is Africa's contribution. The African countries must try, within our means, to create conditions where the factor of refugees is very much diminished, if not completely wiped out. And I said this is being done. One other area which is clearly, efforts are being made by government to try and help the situation in Burundi. The government in Burundi quite evidently and quite clearly has been embarking on measures which, in my judgment, and the judgment of many countries in the world, are aimed at creating an atmosphere where the people of Burundi can feel secure and where there is no need for a person to, as I said, as I use the expression, revolt with one's feet. But there's another dimension also to African refugees, the dimension of the Southern African situation. The refugees from Mozambique, both those who have to leave Mozambique, but those who are displaced in Mozambique, the displaced person, in their hundreds of thousands. These have not been caused because of the policies and actions of the government of Mozambique. These have been caused by the systematic policies of destabilization pursued and perpetrated by the government of South Africa through dissident elements in Mozambique. The same can be said with respect to the situation in other areas where there is instability and destabilization caused by forces from without. The third element concerns the response to the international community to the African refugee problem. That sometimes when people talk of refugees, it is sometimes forgotten that one of the major problems facing our continent is the refugee problem. And simply because in our continent we have not tended to dramatize the problem of refugees, does not mean that the problem of refugees is less important. I remember once I was in Thailand when I was president of the United Nations General Assembly. This was 1980, and I spoke to the then Prime Minister of Thailand, Prime Minister Salim. And I mentioned to him at that time, I told him that in Africa we had something like 4.5 million refugees at that time. And he was absolutely surprised because he was not aware of this. And so you talk about the Cambodian refugees, you talk about the refugees in Afghanistan, you talk about the refugees of Central America. These are important because they are all human beings. They are important. But the fact that the African countries are hospitable to should not make the international community less concerned about the plight of refugees in Africa. The fact that the African countries have not had, there are no incidents of boat people in Africa does not mean that there are no refugees with immense problems now. So the importance of the international community also to address themselves to assist in the settlement and the rehabilitation and the adaptation of refugees in their countries of asylum becomes important. And maybe I should take this opportunity to launch an appeal to the international community to provide generous assistance through the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, which is doing a tremendous job under very, very difficult circumstances of limited financial resources, so that it can also perform its act, its humanitarian act on behalf of the international community more effectively than is otherwise been able to do because of the limitation and scarcity of resources.
Tanzania Information Services. Mr. Salim, how do you intend so borrowing member states failure to pay their membership dues on time? This includes areas. Thank you.
Again, in my acceptance speech in Addis Ababa, I alluded to that. I alluded to the importance of member states paying their contribution. After all, this is an organization of sovereign states, voluntarily agreed. And organizations like any association has its rights, its privileges, and obligations. And it's my opinion that it's an obligation of every member state to pay its dues to the organization. And so all I can say is that I shall continue where my predecessor and brother and his predecessors and brothers, the previous Secretary General of the Belt, to continue to urge the member states to address themselves quite seriously to this question of financial obligations. Because without meeting these obligations, it will become extremely difficult for the organization to be able to cope with these responsibilities. And particularly an organization which is required to cope with the challenges of the last part of this century, the challenges which in your questions have also alluded to, the challenges of economic crisis, the challenges of refugees, the challenges of debt problem, the challenges of political liberation. All these challenges require an organization which can be well equipped to to serve the interests of the member states and to be able to service and perform in accordance with the expectations of the heads of states. Without these resources, the organization will be severely handicapped in performing these responsibilities. Having said that, let me say I know that many of our countries are passing through very difficult economic situations. And many African countries sometimes fail to pay their due, not because they refuse to pay their due, but simply because the financial situation is such that sometimes they are under severe economic constraints to do so. And it is my submission that frankly, where there is a need, there should be no justification why, despite the financial difficulties, member states should pay that due.